I said basically what I felt about the Vegas Grand Prix and the build-up to the Vegas Grand Prix and everything associated with it and the issues in FP1 in an earlier video today. So in this one, I'll just talk about what happened in FP2. It's a relatively straightforward session. It was extended from 60 minutes to 90 minutes because of the foreshortened FP1. The track was basically okay. It was a relatively straightforward session. Looked pretty much like Jeddah, to be honest, in terms of the TV angles we saw. Acceleration runs out of 90-degree corners, a few chicanes, long straights. And Ferrari, as we've been saying, as we said in the live stream, as many people have been predicting, very, very quick. Particularly, of course, because they have a good top speed. They've always been good through the air because they haven't got quite the overall downforce level of Red Bull. The aero efficiency, should we say, of Red Bull. But the straights are so long here and they're spending so much time in full throttle that was a big advantage for Ferrari today. Well exploited by both drivers, by Charles Leclerc, who always looked quick whenever he was out. And at one point, got annoyed with Guan Yu Zhou, but in a nice jovial way. And he said, "Oh, Guan Yu, probably too late for you, poor boy," or something like that. Good to hear, good to see. Lightened up the evening a little bit. And Carlos Sainz, who did very well after the shock of what happened in FP1. And of course, the team too, in rebuilding that car for Carlos, was second. Although, very harshly, I think, he does have to incur penalties because of the new power unit and various other bits that have been installed for this car. You would have thought that, bearing in mind the circumstances of the damage, that he would be okay with that and there'd be no penalties. But a rule is a rule. I think Ferrari might protest that. We'll see what happens there. P3 looking very good. Took a while to get the car sorted as ever with Aston Martin, but Fernando, when he was out on the soft tyres, by which time, for example, the two Red Bulls were already in the pits putting fuel in the car for the long runs. Fernando P3 in the Aston Martin. Quick on the straight, at least as quick as the Red Bulls. Looked very good all round. Very good day for Fernando. And P4 for Red Bull. On this occasion, Sergio Perez, who did a good run on the soft tyre, whilst Max had, we saw Max doing quite a lot of running straight on at the end of the straight, into the runoff areas, tyres not up to temperature, pushing too hard, perhaps sort of thing he does quite a lot on a Friday. Nothing to worry about, I don't think. But on this occasion, only P6 for Red Bull. And splitting the two RB19s, Valtteri Bottas in the black Alfa Romeo here at Vegas. There was a rule in Formula One that liveries couldn't be changed during the course of the season, but obviously that's just been completely thrown out the window. I think it was quite a good rule, actually. I mean, Alfa Romeos basically should be red, and here they are, they're black. So I'm not quite sure what that's all about. I presume it's because the night of Vegas, something like that. Anyway, good performance again by Valtteri Bottas. Be interesting to see whether or not he can keep that up, or whether the team and Valtteri can keep that up over the course of the full weekend, which has always been their bugbear, of course. So where were McLaren? They, like Aston Martin, took a long time to get going, and when they did on the soft tyre, they weren't particularly quick, but because they both went on to longish runs with not full loads of fuel for sure, but they both did long runs, suggests that they're reasonably happy with the setup of the car. Oscar Piastri looking pretty close to Lando Norris on this occasion. And the two Haas Dallara Ferraris were always pretty competitive in the hands of Nico Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen. On this sort of circuit, you would expect them to be. And the other driver I thought who looked very good, not so brilliant on the soft tyre, which I think is encouraging because they look very good on the race tyre, was Alex Albon in the Williams Mercedes. Again, Williams looking good on a circuit where there's a lot of straight line performance. But the real issue, of course, is what happened when they did put fuel in the car, by which time track temperatures had dropped down to 15 degrees centigrade, pretty cold by Formula One standards. But I've got to say, on that softest in the range of Pirelli tyres and the pressures they're running, they didn't look too bad at all, didn't look any worse than normal, let's put it that way. Although grip, obviously very difficult to find in the first couple of laps, and the long straights don't do anything for keeping tyre temperatures up there either. But with fuel in the car on the long runs, we saw a lot of consistency from a lot of the teams out there because of this extended 90-minute session, getting fuel in the car and doing those runs. And it was quite complicated, quite difficult to see directly how they compared because they're all running different fuel loads. But I thought towards the end, we had a pretty good synopsis with Max Verstappen doing, on the medium tyre, 39.1, 38.8, 39.2. And looking at the speeds there, sector 2, which is the long straight, 309, 307, and then 305 on the pit straight, about what Charles Leclerc was doing in the Ferrari, also on medium tyres. Charles a little bit quicker through the air on both occasions, but 39.4, 39.5, when Max is doing 38.8, 39.2. So on that basis, you've got to say on full tanks, Max Verstappen obviously pretty happy with the way the Red Bull is going. Comparing that with Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton looked the quicker, more consistent of the two, looked to be driving really well, actually, looked to be enjoying himself. He said some very positive things about this circuit and the venue, so no doubt that was Lewis expressing himself in the car as well. But looking at the times, 41.6, 40.7, 41.2, 41.8, doesn't look great for Mercedes with fuel in the car. George Russell emulating that. And Carlos Sainz, the other driver, of course, looking very good as well, 39.6 on the medium tyre, compared with, just a reminder, compared with Max doing 39.2, 38.8 in the Red Bull. So what a surprise. Red Bull seem to have got the compromise right. Ferrari too seem to have got their right height compromises pretty good. Bear in mind, of course, that they don't have the same overall downforce as Red Bull, so they're playing with a different set of parameters to get that right, and that's probably why they don't look quite as good with fuel in the car as they did on light fuel. So that was the first day, the first interrupted, rather frustrating day. I don't know what it was like for the spectators staying up that late in America. Bear in mind that Americans tend to eat at about, in my experience anyway, in the couple of years I've lived there, they tend to eat around 6:37 and then go out for their sports events, and they're back home by sort of 11. This one started at midnight or whatever, so how that will go down. And of course, why are the timings the way they are? As I understand it, it's because it's the only time on which they could get the streets basically to race on, because all the other time the public are using them. And I know what Bernie would have said about that. He would have said, right, we're building the circuit out in the desert, as I said in the earlier video. So if you haven't seen that, have a look, because yeah, it's a great idea to put on a street race in the middle of a city like Vegas, in the middle of any city of the world, but it brings with it a multitude of problems. And as I said before, in terms of the business, in terms of running the business effectively, as Formula One has done over the years, there's no substitute really for having a great, I've got to use that word in italics, a great purpose-built circuit somewhere near the city, and then using the city for all your entertainment, your hospitality and everything else. The great element is very important there, because it doesn't really work with Miami. But anyway, if you see what I'm talking about there, have a look at the other video that I did earlier today. Okay, so that was Friday. We'll see what happens tomorrow, Saturday, qualifying day for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Far cry from that first race in 1981, but as we go into the close here, you'll see over the next couple of days, you'll see a few memories of that first race in Vegas. See you tomorrow.